And I remember standing on the hill and looking up at the sky and just thinking, what? And that is when I heard the audible voice of the Holy Spirit in my soul say these words. Hey, welcome to Wonderful Works Talks, where we talk all about the disability ministry mission of helping churches become accessible for all. I'm your host, Barb Stanley, and today we're going to do something different. So if you've been a long-time listener of Wonderful Works Talks, then you know each month we interview someone who's an expert in the field of disability and faith and hear their story. But today, it's me who's sharing. That's right. Today, I have some things to say that just may help you become a better advocate for disability accessibility at your church or whatever it is that you're passionate about. Before we get to that, I want to stop and ask a question. If God has given you a story to share, do you know how to tell it in a way that gets results? Well, today, I'm going to share the story of how I was called into disability ministry, and then I'm going to share what I've learned over the years about how to tell your story in a way that moves people to action. So join us and find out what the Cub Scouts have to do with disability ministry at my church, why what words you use aren't the most important part of your story, and in a Wonderful Works Talks first, find out what moved me to tears. So recently I was presenting to a group at our church and I told them a story that I haven't told in a very long time, and it's about how we got involved in disability ministry to begin with. And what was cool about it was after I was done telling the story, there were some people who had a little bit of teary eyes and asking, how can we get involved and help move the mission forward? And it got me thinking, we all have stories and experiences that God has given us that we can use to help move our mission forward and help churches become more accessible. But not all of us know how to tell our story in a way that gets results. So today, I thought I would share that story and then kind of walk you through how you can get ready to share one of your own stories. So without further ado, here we go. So usually churches get a disability ministry when you have a child in the church who needs extra support, and then usually a parent or a ministry leader will go to the church leadership and ask if they can get something started. That is not how the disability ministry came to be at my church. The way it happened at my church had to do with Cub Scout day camp. So here's what happened. Years ago, when my boys were young, they were Cub Scouts. And one summer, one of my children was going to be going to a regional Cub Scout day camp in our town. Now, myself and a couple friends of mine, we were the troop leaders for my son's troop, and we were going to take turns that week being chaperones at this day camp. So the first day of camp, my friend who had chaperoned that day brought my son home, and she said, "Hey Barb, I know you're scheduled to be a chaperone tomorrow, and there's some things I want you to know." She said, "First off, there's a little boy from another school who's like no one you have ever seen." She said, "He does not act like the rest of the kids." And she told me a little bit more about him, and I thought, yeah, I've seen that before, but I said, oh, okay, that's fine. And then she said, "And they are some of the meanest kids you have ever seen in your life at this camp, so be prepared." And I thought, this is not good. So the next day I got up, I packed up my kids, and we drove to the camp, and I became the chaperone that day. And sure enough, within minutes, I saw the little boy she was talking about, and I recognized him as being a young man who had been in one of my son's preschool classes, and I knew that he had undiagnosed autism. And I knew that because I know what that looks like. So I was prepared to kind of help him through the day. But then a minute later, here comes the other kids that they had talked about, which were, no lie, the meanest boys I have ever met in my life. Now, hang on a second, because yes, I know even bullies have a backstory, and we have to have compassion, and we shouldn't rush to judgment, and everyone needs help. I get that, and I support that. But I also wasn't thinking about that this day. This day, what I was thinking was, this young man with autism needs help from these bullies. So anyway, as the day progressed, The bullies started getting the rest of the boys together and playing a game where they were sing-songing the little boy with autism's name in a rhyme, getting everyone to run away from him and laughing. And the little boy did not understand that they were making fun of him, so he was playing along. I would say that that was one of the most heartbreaking things I've ever seen, except for there was something else there that was more heartbreaking. And that was, as I was watching this young man with autism being made fun of by a group of boys who knew what they were doing, I turned around and I saw those bullies' moms sitting on the grass, talking to each other, watching the whole thing, and doing nothing. Now, I don't know when in your life you have ever been the angriest you have ever been. But even now, as I retell this story, I can feel the chills going up and down my arms. And I remember that moment of just pure anger, which was like a mixture of grief and just unbelief. And I remember taking a deep breath and walking over to one of the boys who was laughing at this kid. And I said to the young man, I said, "Stop it now." And I think I scared the life out of him. I don't know if he is in therapy now after this or not, but what I do know is that that game ended at that point, and all those boys quit making fun of the little boy and went on their way to do something else. At that point, I took the young man with autism and I just had him stay with me for the rest of the camp, and I became like his buddy. But I was shaken. I was shaken to my core, and I don't know if you've ever had this experience or not before, but have you ever been through something emotional that upset you so badly that you felt like you'd been in a car accident, like your whole body hurt, and you felt like you knew that you will never, ever unsee what you just saw, and that from this point in your life, there's going to be a before and an after. And that is how I felt standing there with this young man by my side at Cub Scout camp, feeling like I cannot believe I just watched these bullies making fun of a kid with a disability while their parents watched and ignored it. And something's got to give, because this cannot keep happening. And I remember standing on the hill and looking up at the sky and just thinking, what? And that is when I heard the audible voice of the Holy Spirit in my soul say these words: I have something for you, and if you say yes, your life will never be the same. And I knew that if the Lord was going to ask me to do something, I was going to say yes, and I was going to give it all that I've got. And so I went home, and the next day I went to work. And at that point in my life, I was working for my church as a part-time church secretary. And I asked them, could we start what that time was called special needs ministry? And that is how all of this started. Because of that little boy at Cub Scout camp, we started our ministry. It grew. People needed help. And we started Wonderful Works. And everything that happens from here on out is because God met me right where I was on that hill at Cub Scout camp. And that is the true story of how all of this started. And when I told that to the group at my church, the response that I got was more than I could have asked for. And it really got me thinking about the power of story. So today I want to help you think through some of the times in your life that God has given you experiences that can help you advocate for what you care about most. And I want to give you some tips on how to do that well. So, for the rest of this podcast, we're going to talk about you and how you can tell one of your stories in a way that people can hear it, connect with their heart, and want to take action. And just so you know, I'm going to be telling you some ways to organize your talk and some tips that will work if you're talking in front of a large group, like in a public speaking setting. But please know that everything we talk about here can also be applied to a one-on-one conversation. So even if you are just wanting to share your story with one person, maybe a church leader who you may want to get interested in pursuing disability ministry, everything we talk about can be used in both situations. So if you get an opportunity to speak somewhere, and let's just say it's at your church, the first thing you want to do is decide what story you want to tell, because our lives are made up of thousands of little experiences and stories, kind of like called snapshots, that we often just forget about, but we really could be using to show people something they need to see. So I would start by praying to God and asking, what experience does He want you to share? The next thing you want to do is you want to understand how to tell a story. So the traditional way of looking at how to lay out a story is in three parts: the beginning, the middle, and the end. But I think it's helpful to think about it like this. It's giving the setup, the twist, and the aftermath. So when you find something you want to share, you want to start by kind of setting the scene of how things were going in a direction you kind of expected them to go. And then when the catalyst happens, that's where the twist comes in. You tell them what changed, and then you lay out what was the result of that. So those are the three main points of a story. The rest of what you want to put in your story is details that either make the story make sense or help the person relate to it. And it's really important when you start telling your story that you practice it a few times, because the truth is, when we start telling a story, we all put in way too many details. And that is a really good way to lose your audience engagement. So my first tip I would give you when you are telling your story is to say less, slower. And that means you just want to tell the parts that really matter. So write your whole story down and then start editing it. Or say your whole story to yourself or to a friend and then start asking yourself these two questions. Does this detail that I'm including help make the story make sense? Or does this detail I'm including help the person listening relate to the experience? And if the answer is no to either of those things, then leave it out. And I say that because if you really stop and you think about like public speakers that you really engage with or that teach you something that changes you at a heart level, usually it's not the ones that fill the whole space with words. When we do that and we just keep talking, people get lost. It's really important to let people know what are the important parts of your talk by leaving spaces and being kind of deliberate in how you tell it. So if you look back, kind of here back to the story I told about the camp, you'll notice there's a lot of pauses in there. And those pauses are on purpose because that alerted you when you're listening to know that what you just heard was something you need to pay attention to. And it also gives you some time to process how you feel about it. You will also notice that in that story that I asked a lot of questions about, have you ever felt this when? And the reason that I did that is because when we are telling someone something, especially if it's something they are not familiar with at all, it's important that we help them come into the story in a way they can relate to. So even if you listening to the story have never gone to Cub Scout camp and been a chaperone, you probably have had a place in your life where you felt super angry. And so when I ask you, have you ever felt the angriest you have ever been in your life? I'm willing to bet in that pause that came afterwards, you thought, oh yeah, I know what that feels like. And now you and I have common ground. So that's my tip number 2. Tip number 1, write out your story and edit it down so it's just the parts that matter. Tip number 2, say things slowly and leave pauses where you want people to pay attention. Okay, I got a couple more tips that are really important. So one of the things that I was taught when I first started doing public speaking, and let me tell you, if there's anyone who ever hated public speaking, it was me. I did not like it. It gave me the cold sweats, really nervous. And the only way that I got over it and got comfortable with it is just I kept on doing it. So if you feel nervous talking in front of people, know that that is okay. Just keep doing it, and eventually it will get easier. But a tip that I was given right away that was super helpful was when you're speaking to a crowd, pretend that you're having a conversation with just one person. I found that to be really freeing because that meant I didn't have to memorize anything because I don't have conversations with people in real life where I'm just reciting something from memory. That would be weird. So it's kind of weird when we do it in front of a big crowd, if I'm being honest. So don't try to memorize what you're going to say. Just know the gist of what you want to say and speak from your heart and just talk to that whole crowd like you're talking to one person. And that's another reason why we ask those rhetorical questions is because when we do that, the people in the crowd often feel like you're talking just to them. And that's what you want. You want that connection between each person and you. So that was really helpful. And then also remember this. Your words that you use are important, but they are not the most important thing you're going to communicate. Your tone is more important. So people, when they leave your talk, are not going to remember what you said. They will remember how they felt when they heard you speak. So if you are doing a talk with hopes for advocacy, that you're hoping that someone is going to now want to partner with you to do something different than they've ever done before. In our case, like we talk a lot about disability ministry, so a lot of people sharing their story may want their church to, after hearing their story, want to partner with them to maybe invest more in accessible church. If you're going to be asking for that partnership, it is incredibly important that you are a safe person for them to partner with. And that means your tone matters. You can tell a hard story. I'm not saying that you have to just say sunshine and roses is everything. You may have been through some hard stuff that's hard for people to hear, and you need to be honest in that, and it's okay to be emotional. But you also want to make sure that when you speak, you are not shaming. When we shame people, we drive them away. I mean, think about the last time that someone made you feel ashamed. Were you like, couldn't wait to get back with that person and work with them? No. So when we are talking, even if we're giving hard truths, remember that you also want to leave that person with dignity, the people listening with dignity, and give them hope that if they hum and help you, you guys can work together. So, and just another minute on that, because I feel like there are going to be people listening to this right now that are going to totally disagree with what I said about not having a shaming tone. And it's okay to disagree. I'm good with it. But from my perspective, when I see people, especially on social media, because we live in this age today where it's almost like considered to be heroic to put people down, throw them under the bus, shame people, be snarky. And then we look, and a lot of times these influencers who use that mode of communication have thousands of followers. And I think it's really easy for us to think that is the ticket. Like, these people are obviously being effective in their message and making change. But truthfully, probably those thousands of followers are people who are already agreed with them. And real change comes from persuading people who don't agree with you. So don't be fooled by influencers who may be communicating in ways that I think is not Christ-like. I do not think it's Christ-like to shame people or to put them down or to publicly humiliate them, especially. That is not where true change comes from. True change comes from inviting people in to collaborate with you and helping them know how to do that. So keep that in mind whenever you're sharing your story, that your goal is not to vent out everything that's upset you, but it is to tell the story in a way that honors the truth, but also feels safe enough for the people listening to want to be able to come beside you and make changes. So now I want to talk about the ending of your story. So remember, we said point one of a story is to get the setup so everyone understands what you're talking about. Point two is the twist, which is where whatever the catalyst of the story happens. And then point three is the ending, or what I like to call the aftermath, like what happens after the action takes place. So in the story I told, this would be after hearing from the Holy Spirit, we started the disability ministry. What I want to tell you is a lot of times when we get an opportunity to share our story with a lot of people, I think we can feel pressure that the ending needs to be like a Hollywood ending where everything gets neatly tied up in a bow at the end, everything works out, and it sounds great. And the truth is, most of the experiences in our lives don't end that way. And I want to tell you that is okay. If you tell your story and it ends messily or it ends open-ended and you're still struggling with something, not only is that okay to say, it actually can be helpful when you are trying to get people to make a change, because it gives you a natural pathway into saying, if you help, things could get better. So I just want to encourage you in that. Don't worry if your story still is being told. And then the other point to that that's so, so important, when you're done telling your story, after all the applause dies down, the most important thing you can do is then give a tangible call to action. And this is where a lot of people forget to do this step, and so they may share their story and then leave and wait for whoever they talk to figure out a way to make everything better. But the truth is, a lot of times when people hear what we're dealing with, they do get a heart change and they do want to help, but they have no idea how. So it's really important that you can help them to know how to take the next step. So lay that out. So that is how you can share your story. I hope those tips helped you. We will have all of the points that we covered today in the show notes. So I hope you'll take some time to check those out. And before we end this, I do kind of want to circle back to the original story I told about Cub Scout camp, because I do often get two questions that people ask me every time I tell it. The first question that I get on this is, why didn't I go talk to the moms on the hill? Because clearly they needed someone to talk to them. And the answer to that is because I am an Appalachian Scotch-Irish artist and I have a bad temper. And I know when I get to a place where I should not be having conversations with people that I'm upset with. And that's how I was that day at Cub Scout camp. So I thought it was best to not end up on the news and not talk to the moms that day and just pray. And I did pray that someone else at some point in time would come to them and talk to them and move their hearts. And I hope that did happen. So no, I did not confront the moms. I just stopped the bullying and then really cried out to God, as you heard. The second question or thing I want you to know is not every boy in that group played that game. It makes me emotional. Because none of the boys in our troop played that game because I knew there might be problems. When I was driving them the 45 minutes to that camp, we had lots of discussions about being accepting to kids who are different and how to be a good friend. And so the 3 from our school not only did not play that game, but I have to tell and brag on one of the young men in our group. Because when later in that day, when we were still going through all the activities and they asked people to pair up, there was 3 boys from our group, which meant 2 were together and then 1 was on his own. And when they asked that young man who he would take as a partner, he invited the little boy with autism to be his partner. And then I will never forget this as long as I live. The little boy who did not understand social cues and social norms at one point kind of leaned over on the child from our troop and put his head on his shoulder, which if you are a 5th grade boy, that is not cool. And I will always remember the young man from our troop let him do it. And I don't think I've ever been prouder of anyone as I was of the 3 boys from our troop that day. So the other part of the story is when we take the time to talk to our kids and educate them about why accepting people the way they are matters and how that is really what living out your faith means, or what, in this case, what I told them, what it truly means to honor the Cub Scouts, they listen. And thank you for listening. I hope the story that I shared means something to you, and I would ask that if it did, your call to action would be, would you please share this podcast with others, subscribe, and leave a comment? Because the more people engage with our podcast, the more people can hear about the important mission of disability ministry. And then I want to leave you with this. Your story matters too. Thank you. If you'd like to learn more about what we're doing at Wonderful Works Ministry, please check out wonderfulworksministry.org. And don't forget, if you like this podcast, please subscribe and share with others. We'll see you next time.